this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
Donald Rumsfeld, who was the Secretary of Defense at the time, pushed for the U.S. military, for Central Command, to send the smallest possible force to Iraq. He didn't think we needed hundreds of thousands of troops as we had sent in 1991 to fight Saddam Hussein. In fact, almost 500,000 American troops. This time there would be only about 150,000 U.S. troops. Because Rumsfeld was so bedazzled by the American success in Afghanistan with such a small number of soldiers. And initially, the operations went about as well as could be expected. It took only 3 weeks in early 2003 for the fall of Baghdad, a very fast advance. The U.S. was able to use precision munitions very effectively. 68% of all U.S. munitions dropped were precision munitions. And so a force much smaller than the one we'd employed in 1991 was able to go much farther and to overthrow the Saddam Hussein regime. But what we quickly found out was that while yes, it is possible for a much smaller high-tech force to defeat a much larger low-tech force, you still need boots on the ground. You still need old-fashioned infantry to control territory. And the U.S. had not sent enough troops to Iraq to control the country. As a result of that, not long after the fall of Saddam Hussein, an insurgency broke out against the U.S. occupation, and the U.S. was not prepared to deal with this. We had not done the planning or the preparation for counterinsurgency. We didn't have enough troops, and very rapidly the insurgency spiraled out of control. And oh, by the way, at the same time, you had the same thing happening in Afghanistan. Same exact story. The U.S. had overthrown the Taliban with very few personnel on the ground, but the U.S. did not have enough people to control the country. And in both Afghanistan and Iraq, we did not build up government security forces fast enough to secure our gains. And so very soon the Taliban got up off the mat and launched a full-scale insurgency against the U.S. in Afghanistan. And then in Iraq, you had two insurgencies, both Sunni and Shiite insurgencies. And the Sunni insurgency gave rise to al-Qaeda in Iraq, which eventually transformed into what came to be known as the Islamic State of Syria and Iraq. And what we quickly discovered in both Afghanistan and Iraq is the age-old lesson of guerrilla warfare, that insurgents and terrorists can negate the firepower of a much more advanced military machine for one very simple reason. They don't fight in the open. And insurgents hide in plain sight. They wear civilian clothes, they don't wear uniforms, they strike from the shadows. And that makes it very difficult for even a very high-tech military to figure out who they're fighting. So these age-old guerrilla tactics actually turn out to be a very effective counter to the kind of very advanced computer technology and military technology that the United States deployed in Afghanistan and Iraq. And what happened was, in frustration, as American casualties piled up, as we took greater losses, U.S. forces would often lash out. They would bomb places that they thought where militants were hiding, or they would round up huge numbers of young men and cart them all off to prison and hope that one of them might be a terrorist. Well, those kinds of broad brush tactics, heavy-handed tactics, they usually backfire, because what happens is you're killing innocent people, you're detaining innocent people, and their families are upset. And what often happens is you're creating more insurgents than you eliminate. And all of this demonstrates how hard it is, even for a very high-tech military, to fight very low-tech adversaries.